Alright, this is Mr. Gillum, and today we're going to be looking at an example out of your Practice and Problem Solving book on page 145, and we're going to look at the distance between points. This problem says that the locations of different stores are shown on the map. There is a sports store at point S and a clothing store at point C. Each unit on the coordinate plan represents 1 mile. How many miles is the clothing store from the sports store? So, it looks like we're supposed to go from C to S, or this is the distance that we're looking for, from the clothing store all the way up to the sports store. Okay. Now, I was going to explain this to you in class a little bit, but if I made a perfect rectangle or a perfect square, and each side was exactly the same length, okay, this side would be equal to this side, would be equal to this side, would be equal to this side. All right. What we have here is what we call a diagonal. And that's from one corner to the other. And you may be tempted to think that from here, this vertex to this vertex, this distance right here, is the same length as one of the sides. But in class, what we're going to do is we're going to measure that, and you're going to find that the diagonal is actually going to be longer than a side length. So if I was counting on a coordinate plane from here to here, it wouldn't be 1. That's not true. That diagonal is not the same as just one side length. Okay, so from here to here is not 2. It's actually more than 2. So we can't count diagonally. We can only count left and right or up and down. Someday you'll learn about the Pythagorean theorem, and then you'll learn how to find the distance of the diagonals. But for now, we can't just count diagonally and just assume that each diagonal is 1, because it's not 1. It's actually farther than 1. So we're not allowed to count diagonally. So really the only places that we could find the distance between would be S and C, or M and E. We could find this distance if we wanted to, or we could find use a different color. We could find the distance between R and E. We could not find the distance between M and C with the knowledge that we have right now. We could not find the distance between these two in a straight line distance. I mean, we would not be able to find that. Or these two, or these two. Anything diagonal, we would not be able to find the distance of just by counting, or just by using absolute value in any way. Someday you'll learn that, but right now we can just find the distance between 2 points that are exactly vertically aligned or exactly horizontally aligned. So back to this problem, we want to know how far it is from S, which is the clothing, S is the sports store, to C, the clothing store. That's how far we need to go. So we can do this a couple different ways. We can use the visual and say, okay, well, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. They are 11 miles apart. If each of these squares represents, each length of the side of the square represents a mile, it would be 11 miles apart. What I prefer you to do is I'd prefer you to consider a point in the middle, which not exact middle, but somewhere in the middle that's easy to calculate by using absolute value. So I know that the sports store and 0, that distance is easily calculable, because I know this is 5. The y-coordinate is 5, so it's 5 from 0. So if I know what the absolute value of 5, or the distance that 5 is from 0, I can find how many miles are there. And the same thing for C, the clothing store. If I can figure out how far it is from here to here, I know that the depth is -6. However, the distance, the absolute value of -6, is actually a distance of 6. Oops. When you take the absolute value of something, please do not use the bars anymore, because we already have the distance. So that is 6. I should say that again, because it's important, and I always see students doing this. When I find the absolute value of 5, it's just 5. There are no longer bars on the other side of it. Okay, that would be incorrect. It's just 5. Okay. When I find the absolute value of -6, it's not the absolute value of 6. It's just 6. So I guess the strategy here is to think about how far things are from 0. And instead of counting 11 spots, I'm counting a distance of 6 here and 5 here, making a total distance of 11. So 11 miles from the store. And you can see that they wrote that here as well. So someday when you are adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers, this will also help you. If you consider everything as its relationship is to 0. So I'm assuming that they're going to ask you about the distances between points M and E or R and E because those are vertically or horizontally aligned. They may ask you something about why you can't count from R to C diagonally. Well, that's because the diagonal of a square is longer than its side lengths. So if that comes up, I hope you're prepared and well prepared to answer that. But that's it for today.